Dan currently serves on the board of the U.S. Agricultural Export Development Council and the International Meat Secretariat, and was appointed to USDA's Agricultural Policy Advisory Committee in 2019. A University of Iowa graduate, he was raised on a grain and cattle operation near Cherokee, Iowa. Thanks for joining us today to give the Global Protein Update.
All right, good afternoon. How is everyone? Last session, so we'll make it quick. Well, I'd like to welcome you all. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm live in Denver now, but I'm originally from Iowa, so it's always good to get back to Iowa. Love to have a reason to come back, and I rarely miss an expo, so good to be here. All right, let's just jump in. A lot of moving parts. A lot of talk, tariffs, no tariffs, list goes on. But one takeaway that I have, and we have some folks in the room now that are seeing it firsthand in the export side. But demand is pretty good, record-breaking in some countries despite all the rhetoric. So let me run you through a few slides, but I'm not going to PowerPoint you to death. If you have questions as we go, just shout it out. Let's talk as we go, okay? So first of all, what is USMEF, United States Meat Export Federation? We're a nonprofit trade organization based in Denver. Simply put, our goal is to advance the export opportunity on beef, pork, and lamb around the world. And how do we do that? Relationship building, marketing, promotion, education, a lot of the same things that mirror the act and order of the checkoff. So, but with that, before I really get started, and I'm looking around the room, I don't know if anyone's in here. Oh yeah, Andy's here. But we really wanted to thank the National Pork Board for this invitation and the National Pork Producers Council. The collaboration between our organizations is vital. We couldn't do what we do today on the pork side without that collaboration from the pork industry. So thank you. All right, so before I was a staffer at MEF, I was a member for, well, I won't go into the details, a long time. My entire career, I was a member before I joined USMEF. And in my opinion, this is one of the keys. We're based in Denver with about 30 staff in Denver, but we have about 105 to 110 globally in 20 regions around the world. And you can see most of these regions, North Asia, Latin America, Southeast Asia are the three highly concentrated areas with staff, which also corresponds with the major markets that we export to. So these people are on the ground, boots on the ground each and every day, speak the language, know the culture, and are representing beef, pork, and lamb each and every day. And they're always, during COVID, we never missed a beat because the people were on the ground, even though we couldn't travel internationally. So this is a resource for our members, especially exporter members, of which we have several in the room. They're reaching out either through Denver or directly to these offices for intel, what's going on with the competition, what's going on with the product mix, things like this. Last point, our oldest office, the first one, we're almost 50 years old. 49 years ago, we opened our Tokyo office, so that's our oldest office. And our two newest offices are in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and in Jakarta, Indonesia, which opened last year. So we're really excited about that Southeast Asian corridor. All right, let's get into a few of the numbers, and stop me as we go. So on the left-hand side, this is a volume chart of all pork exported. You can see back to 2003. Last year, a record in volume and value globally. Over 3 million metric tons and over 8.6 billion in sales. And I'll have a slide coming up on that. But on the right-hand side, you can see the first quarter year-to-date stats for the last 5 years broken out. But we're basically steady with last year's record pace. Now this is through March. The April data was just released a few hours ago, so we haven't had time to put it in a slide. It is down a bit, mainly due to China, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. and some of the disruptions around this tariff talk, which I'll also talk about in a minute. So, but it gives you a pretty good idea. That trend line on the left, slow, steady growth, broad-based growth, is what our goal is, and the goal is to continue that. This is the value equivalent of that side. As I said, we were 8.6 billion last year, and we're basically on the same pace through 1/4 of this year. Put it in a different way, the value of every animal exported, or every, I should say, you take the international export value divided by the number of hogs slaughtered. Last year was a record at $67 a head. First quarter of this year, we're just slightly under that, 66 and change. So basically steady with a year ago, which is record pace. So this is probably a little more meaningful. What's the breakout by market? So if you look, it's really not a surprise. I'm going to show you a slide here in a minute that breaks out the markets in a little different way. But Mexico has been the star the last couple of years. You're looking at $20 of that $67 is Mexico. That's quite the shift. I got another slide in a minute that compares it to 5 years ago. Amazing growth in Mexico. It's been the story of the last 2 years. And just amazing growth despite what the cutout does. Cutout goes up, cutout goes down. We seem to continue to have this growth. A lot of reasons for that, which I'll talk about here in a bit. Japan, $10 a head. China, Hong Kong, 9. Korea, 6. But the other section, Southeast Asia in particular, is huge. Central America, big. Colombia, they all go into that other section. That section's growing the quickest outside of Mexico. I just got a couple of beef slides. I wanted to give some context. Little different format. But the bar chart on the left, the solid dark blue, will show you the equivalent to what I showed you on the pork slide a minute ago. So you can see 2024 tied for roughly the third largest export year ever on tonnage. The lighter blue dotted line is the value equivalent off the right axis. 10.5 billion roughly last year in beef exports globally. And if you look over to the right, that's the year-to-date first quarter. We're basically up just a little bit on beef export value through the first quarter. Export value per head, $422 a head last year. Not a record, but the second highest on a per head basis. And that does not include rendered products and hides. If you were to put rendered products and hides in at about $30, it's right at $450 a head. And you can see up in the upper right-hand corner, the first quarter of this year, the average is 421. So we're right there with last year on the value per head basis. Breakout by market. A little different mix here, not nearly as reliant on Mexico. Culturally, Mexico is very much pork eater country, not so much beef, although beef is growing quickly. But you look at Korea, $95 a head, $75 a head in Japan, China, Hong Kong, 78, Mexico still big at 50. But look at that other section. Similar to the pork side, that other section is the one that's growing quickly. That's Southeast Asia, Central America, Middle East in the case of beef, also Africa in the case of beef. Okay, this is back to pork now. So if you look at the left-hand pie chart, that's 2019 calendar year. Right-hand side is 2024, just for comparison. So look at that growth in Mexico. $10 a head increase in 5 years on an annualized basis. Japan, basically steady, down just slightly. China, Hong Kong, down slightly. Korea's up a bit, but once again, that other section is the one that's growing $5 a head. So $53 a head on exports in 1966, or almost 67 last year. And the goal of the industry, packers, traders, us as a trade association is to diversify these markets as much as possible, not be reliant on any one market or any two or three, particularly not reliant on China. And we're going to talk about that situation here in a minute. But expect that other section. We're going to have to change these bar charts and put some other countries in there because the other section is going to keep growing, in my opinion anyway. So, all right. So a little different format. This is a 5-year chart. The right-hand part of the axis is this year. You can see, you look at Mexico, 11% growth last year. You look at Japan, down about 15%. Still a $2 billion market, but we are seeing some shifts, some demographic shifts. Economy maybe not quite as strong as it used to be. Strong US dollar, which makes our prices higher in yen terms. That was another issue the last several years. Doesn't mean it's not an important market. Still very, very important, but we're seeing growth, quicker growth out of some of the other regions. China, Hong Kong, up 7%. I'm going to come back to that. Canada, Korea down a bit. Central America, huge growth, 23%. Same thing on beef for Central America. South America, 5% up. The big driver there, of course, being Colombia. Chile as well. And the Caribbean region, ASEAN, Southeast Asia, you know, that's Malaysia is one of the big changes there. Malaysia recently has we've gotten plants approved and quite a bit of an incremental increase into Malaysia on the pork side as well. So, you know, back to China, we've gotten the stats for April, which are not reflected here yet. China's down big, as we knew it would be. If you remember, April 2nd was, what they call it, Liberation Day? Liberation Day, where we rolled out all these tariffs, and there was a reaction out of one country, China. So I think I've got a slide on that, which I won't go into now, but we're down big in China for April on both beef and pork, which was expected. Okay. This is just another chart showing you Mexico and the trend lines here. You know, when I started in this business a long, long time ago, my first trip was to Mexico in the 80s, international trip. And very unreliable market, very risky market. Credit terms were hard to get. You know, you couldn't drink the water, didn't know, you know, it was very risque, so to speak. And now, other than Spanish, you go to Mexico City, you think you might be in, you know, Chicago or New York. And it's a very reliable trading partner. There's many exporters in the room that can tell you better than I. But, and also, the other thing that's changed is on the beef side, they used to buy just select, no roll. They'd take beef when it was cheap enough. And now we have a lot of choice and higher customers, like a Costco, for example, in Mexico. Buys only choice and higher, and at a 365 choice cutout, still buying beef today. That's a reliable partner. They're following the market. They're not price buying. Why? They appreciate our quality. They know very well how much we're differentiated, the reputation, safety, and of course, eating experience. And I think if you're in the session next door before this, that's a big part, is the eating experience, right? You gotta have confidence, but you want a good eating experience. And I think, especially if you compare, you know, on the beef side, it's easy to compare. You know, our main competitors around the world are grass-fed and older animals. We have younger animals, we have them grain-finished, we have a very deep, rich flavor, but it is more expensive. We don't want to be the cheapest guy. So I think markets like Mexico not only are recognizing it, but we're starting to see the payoff. It's a big shift from 10, 20 years ago. All right. So a couple of things that we're doing in market. We have what we call meat trucks, pork trucks, beef trucks. We have a grilling 18-wheeler, you know, a big grilling truck that rolls out. And you have smokers, you have cookers, you have areas for seminar demonstrations. And these trucks go around to partners, importers, retailers in particular. Retailers are big in places like Mexico and also in Central America. And this has been extremely successful. And I'll tell you where it started. It started during COVID, because one of the most successful things we do is tasting demos. You know, you go into Costco, do the tasting demo, and then they run in a special. Well, it's similar overseas. But during COVID, because of close contact, they did away with tasting demos in store. We approached the retailers in Mexico, and most of Mexico, it's nice enough outside most all year long that you can do the tasting demos outside. So that's what we did with these grilling trucks. So successful during COVID that they all asked us to keep it and expand it, even though we can still do demos now back in store if we want to. So, you know, something really simple, but if there's any good, there's not many good outcomes out of COVID, but this might be one of them. That we still have this today, and it's one of the most successful things we do. All right. So, this is also an example in Mexico. New product development. This Carney Snack project is interesting. Convenience stores like 7-Eleven, Family Mart, you know, it's when you think of convenience stores here in the U.S., you think of the hot dog going round and round on the broiler for days on end, right? It's not that way in Japan or even in Mexico. This is much higher quality products in a perishable area. A lot of them are gift boxes, for example. Now, the Carney Snack, I'm getting a little off topic here. The Carney Snack is also in these convenience stores. So OXXO in Mexico has 22,000 convenience stores. I believe there's around 60,000 total in the whole country. But we have this snack using pork loin into a jerky along with potato chips in this package that's being sold in 22,000 OXXOs. And that research started with checkoff dollars down there. We researched it. We worked Monterey Tech, a very famous, sort of like the Iowa State of Mexico, on ag, helped us with the research. And this is one of the outcomes. And this is just one example. We have a lot of new products, mainly from underutilized cuts. Pork loin is, some people would say, very underutilized. But anyway, we can utilize it better. And so we got that in that store. And on the right-hand side, which I think it's now played out, that was a snack box, Ramos Chicharron with pork jolls. It's like a potato chip. And they hand it out on one of the airlines in Mexico. It's part of their, instead of peanuts, you can get a chicharron box. And that's what the lady, she was announcing it, the flight attendant announcing it on one of the flights. So this is some of the creativity, some of the innovation on moving some of these products. Pork jowl, this is the cheek of and none of us really eat many pork jolls here in the U.S. I mean, Daryl, you might, but the rest of us. But no, seriously, this sort of creativity, adding value, because, you know, when we think of the center of the plate, a lot of these countries, their center of the plate items are much different than ours. We're trying to upgrade the value, like a pork jowl is a good example. Probably the most important thing we do as an organization, and the exporter members in here that are involved in this see it quite a bit, is putting buyer and seller together. Sounds pretty basic, right? But our job as an organization is to identify these buyers from all the different segments, retailers, wholesalers, importers, distributors, food service, further processors. And we should have a database in these larger markets of 30, 40,000 contacts or more. Japan's more. And these guys, the exporters, can tap into that. But we can introduce them virtually, but what's more common is having events where we introduce them. And this one here is what we had in 2024, U.S. Red Meat Symposium featuring beef, pork, and lamb. And we had about 250 people in Mexico City total, but we had probably 90% of the industry represented. The 90% of the companies had at least one person there from the players in Mexico. So bringing everyone into one place, a little bit about education, a lot about social networking, introducing them, having them an opportunity to meet new buyers, our exporters, and vice versa. And it's resulted in a lot of new business. And that's part of the growth that you see with those Mexico numbers. At the same time, Expo Carney's in 2025 in Monterey is a traditional trade show, and it's also one of the largest events within the Mexico trade held in Monterrey. And we had teams there. You can see we do a lot of ROI, where we're tracking the outcome from the shows, what the exporters will share. But the real benefit is building those relationships so that 6 months, 1 year, 10 years down the road, the business is still going on. And that's the real ultimate goal. That repeat business is what we need. Central America, so you got probably the biggest market is Guatemala, but you also have El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama, Dominican Republic. It's not really in Central America, but we include it because of the language. And a couple of other I'm forgetting. But this region also, very similar to Mexico, 10 years ago, price got over a certain point on beef or pork, they'd stop buying. Now they're evolving. They're following the markets into regular buyers, whether the cutouts 106 on the pork side or it's 90. Hams are $1.10 or they're 80. You know, staying in the market for regular business is the goal. And I think we're seeing that for the most part in Central America. And you can see, you go back 10 years, 2014, it was pretty small business. But it's continuing to, especially the last 4 years, really growing by leaps and bounds. So, probably the single largest thing that we do outside of Japan is what we call our Latin American Showcase. And this is a showcase in a certain region. So this year, July 30th, we'll be in Guatemala City, Guatemala. And we have 2 hotels sold out for this event because we have about over 500 people coming. And this is probably buyers from 23, 24 countries, John, I think something like that. About 175 buyers from 23 countries in Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. We also have about 70 exporting companies, several that are in here. Hi, Katie. Looking around, I see new people. Where'd she come from? There. You wouldn't miss her, but she was so quiet. Yeah, right. But anyway, so 70 exporting companies, probably 250 plus people, maybe 300 from the exporter side. They're together for 2 days, one location. For the exporters or the buyers to visit all these people, it'd take 1 to 2 months. We do it in 2 days. What's the purpose? Introductions, relationship building, new contacts, old contacts, get to know them better. We spend a lot of money on this. And like I said, outside of Japan, this is the single largest event we do every other year. Importance of free trade agreements. And I don't see anyone from NPPC in here, but they're a vital partner in terms of the Washington, D.C. scene, in terms of market access, lobbying, and there's no bigger success than these free trade agreements that we have established over the years as an industry. Chorus, the Korean Free Trade Agreement, implemented in 2012, actually concluded in 2007, but implemented 5 years later. USMCA, Mexico, Canada, very important. CAFTA, Central America Free Trade Agreement. Colombian Free Trade Agreement. Well, if you go back and look at pork and beef stats, which we just looked at, it's no coincidence that those are 5 or 6 of our biggest partners. Why? Zero duty or very low duties. And also, for the most part, no non-tariff trade barriers. That is the goal. And in this current reciprocal process, which I'll talk about here in a minute a little more, it's our hope that those free trade agreement partners that have already invested in zero duties with us will get credit for that. Because there's plenty of players out there that are not playing by the rules. Vietnam stands out, very high tariffs on our products. Indonesia on the beef side stands out. Tariffs are relatively high, but the issue there is halal certification and plant approvals, very complicated on getting that done. Those are the sorts of things where we can really benefit from this reciprocal process that FAS and USTR are working on right now. But look at that growth in 10 years. Left side's pork, the right side is Oh, left side is pork volume, right side is pork value. I'd take 10 more markets like that one with that kind of growth. It's been amazing. Getting to be Korea was not always all that reliable, but they're pretty darn reliable today. And they're big, big meat eaters. Per capita consumption continues to go up. I think on a per capita basis, they're the highest in the world, other than maybe Argentina. So very, very good customer. So some of the things that we're doing on pork specifically, since this is the Pork Expo, the food service dining segment is very much in vogue, very complicated, very huge expansion food service in Korea. So we've got 4 partners listed up here. Frank Burger, largest family-style burger chain. They call it a bulgogi burger, but they got several different kinds of burgers. And they recently expanded they've been using beef all along, U.S. beef, currently expanded their bulgogi burger to include pork from the U.S. So they replaced domestic Korean ham with U.S. picnic in all 700 of their stores. Now it's not as big a mover as beef, but it's still pretty big. So that's one example where beef, which had immense success over the years in Korea, has now expanded to include pork. So that's another benefit of what we do multi-species in these offices is, and Mexico's a good example where beef has benefited from pork. Pork's the cultural preference in Mexico. But we're seeing all sorts of traction on beef now. So when you're talking to these buyers, they buy it all, whether it's Costco or Gigante. There's many, many different concepts. So I think that's sort of the hidden value in what we do is that we're in there talking about, in this case, talking about beef. Hey, what about pork? And yeah, that's a good idea. Let's expand our SKUs to include U.S. pork. The right side here, Hong Kong, Banjum, 280 restaurants, 100 tons, of U.S. pork per month. My reason in putting that in is that, Korea used to be just a pork butt market and some picnics for further processing. Now, they used to export loins. They didn't have any demand for loins there. They'd export them and compete against us in other countries. Now they're importing loins every month from the U.S., and quite a few, actually. There's some people in the room doing some of the business. This is a complete shift in the last 5 years, expanding to that loin complex into some of these countries in Asia other than Japan. Japan's always bought loins, but now we have Korea involved in it too. So that carcass diversification by market is another thing that we're always focused on. The more markets, the better in some of these primals. And I think those of you that follow the markets, and especially the cutout, I know the packers in the room know that the loin's a drag, literally, on the cutout. So we need a little more competition in the world for the loins and push that cutout value higher. And the bottom 2 chains, you can see that we have on the right side there, udon restaurant chain using boneless butts in their udon. And in the left-hand side, processed pork example with a chain that has, I can't pronounce the name of the chain, sorry, but there's 600 restaurants using the processed pork, hot dogs actually. So anyway, just wanted to share with you some of that. All right. This is what we've been hearing about tariffs. So part of the problem that we have in the market right now, there's quite a few challenges. But the uncertainty is the main challenge. What's going to happen after the 90-day cooling off period? Tariffs go up in China, then they go down. So this is China. Left-hand side is beef. In January of this year, the U.S. beef tariff into China was 12%. Very reasonable, normal. April, we have Liberation Day. China immediately retaliates, 147% tariff on U.S. beef. It shut off the beef business. And just for reference, in May, we kissed and made up a little bit, and now it's back to 32%. The problem is that there's something else happened. Is anyone else, other than those that are in the business, the selling business, what else happened in April when the tariffs went to 147%? They didn't relist all the beef plants. 400 establishments for the US were not relisted in their Chinese plant registration system called Cipher. So this is a card that they're using in the overall negotiation. They know 1.5 billion in sales of US beef to China last year. They're holding that card in the overall negotiation. So it doesn't matter that we can sell beef at 32% duty, but not if the plants aren't relisted. So that April data that came out, huge decline in beef to China, as we expected. And on the right-hand side, a little bit better news. No plants were all relisted as they should have been on the pork side. So we don't have that issue. But in January, we were 37% duty on US pork, went to 172 in April. Then after we kissed and made up, 57%. Now 57% is too high, but some business is being done. But we're also rendering some products, or have been, especially at the 172. So this uncertainty is problematic just because when you have transit time, let's say from production to delivery in China, for example, it might be 6 weeks, 7 weeks. Well, in this environment, look how every day it's something new. Imagine if you put 6 weeks out there. So hopefully we get some stability back into the market. And I think it will with China, but who knows when. It's going to take some time. There's a lot of moving parts. Beef and pork are probably just a small part of the overall discussions. But USTR, our trade representative office, is well aware of the priority that we have from our industry. Okay? Last slide. So what we have, the top is production, pork in the US. Bottom is, of course, beef in the US. And then the export history. These are USDA numbers. So you can see for 2025, USDA this year has production up slightly, and they've got exports flat to maybe down 1%. And you can see the estimate for next year. Our number on pork is steady to up slightly, with one caveat, that the current situation with China does not get any worse than it is today for pork. Okay, that's our, I mean, if we were to get plants delisted or whatever, the number would probably be a little lower. But we're assuming status quo. Beef side, production forecasted by USDA to be down 2.1%. Actually, I think that'll be adjusted higher because we're not retaining as many heifers as what they estimated to begin with. They're a little behind. And they got exports down 11%. Our number is down, for this year, down 6%. But that's assuming no relistment for China. We're just going with what the situation is today, which is no beef. 99% of the beef plants are delisted for China. I don't think that'll really happen. I think something will change and improve between now and later in the year. But for purposes of our forecast, down 6% if there's no change in the current situation. So that means a new record on pork, potentially, or at least steady with last year's record. And on beef, third largest year ever. Last year, our forecast would be down just slightly from that, probably be the fourth largest year ever. So still pretty good. Demand, like I said, seems very, very solid, resilient, given all the headwinds and all the unknowns. Well, anyway, thank you for everyone for your time, and I'm around afterwards if you have any more questions. Thank you.